Hey guys, Myra, creator of Zeoto Heat Pen. Zeoto Heat Pen is a lead-free certified heat pen. It's great to work on all kinds of edible mediums, from poured chocolate all the way to isomalt. You can even use it on wafer paper, sugar sheets, engrave on cookies, sculpt on chocolate, and lots more. What I want to do today is do a little demonstration of how you can engrave on cookies to create beautiful designs. You can either royal ice over them, add pearls, or just leave them the way that they are and add very few designs with fondant, modeling chocolate, whatever tastes delicious to you. A little bit about the heat pen. The heat pen has an on and off switch, and this is your heat controller. This portion right here gets extremely hot when you're working with it, so you want to make sure not to touch it, and when you're going to change your tips, turn it off so that it cools down. It doesn't take very long. Also, you want to make sure to always keep your tips clean, because the residue builds up on the tip and starts to burn, and it can transfer from one location to the next and not give you a very good result when you're working with it. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to be demoing on will be a sugar cookie. Now this recipe is just a basic sugar cookie recipe from the Preppy Kitchen. I love his formula because it's a very clean edges. The important factor about your heat pen is to always make sure that your heat is the proper heat for the medium that you're working with, because you don't want to burn it and you don't need to struggle very hard to create any kind of etching or stenciling on your cookie. I suggest starting at 90 degrees Celsius. Try it on a cookie. If you find that you're still struggling too much or it's not creating a nice clean line, bump it up a little bit. So right now I have my heat pen set at between 110 to 150 degrees Celsius. Now when you're working with your heat pen, you don't want to move super fast because you want to allow the heat to do the magic. That's the key. If your pen is generating the heat onto your cookie and you're seeing it melt, you can move without having to apply pressure or force. And you shouldn't have to when you're working with the heat pen. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take, you can see I was playing around to get the right heat. I have some that you can see the lines are a little bit cleaner. I have less heat there. I had a little bit too much heat here, so you can see that I started to burn my cookie a little bit. And we don't want that. We want just the perfect heat to create these nice clean lines. Another important thing is to make sure your tip is always clean with a damp cloth. Make sure to have one next to you to clean the residue so it doesn't sit there and start to burn. And you can hear it sizzle when you clean your tip. You hear that? And there's a little smoke coming out. Oh yes, we know this pen is hot. So please make sure you do not touch from here on with your hands. Stay back here where the rubber grip is, and that will protect you from getting burned. All right, so I'm going to try my tip. Again, I said you don't have to use this tip. You can use any other tip in your kit. Play around with different ones and see which one you like the best. Now I am just laying my heat pen on the cookie and I am gliding my hand backwards, and I'm not even applying any pressure at all. I'm just allowing the heat to work, and you can feel it sink in a little bit as you're working with it on the cookie. And it's so super easy. Now, if you're gonna work fast, you might want to bump the temperature up a little bit so that it is hotter and is able to work on the cookie to soften that surface so that you can create your lines or stenciling or any other design that you want on it. Okay, so you saw how easy I moved my heat pen, and see how nice and clean that line is. Now I'm going to work a little faster with the same amount of heat, and you will see that the outcome is going to be different. Now I'm having to apply pressure in order to get it to work, and we don't want that. There is no need to apply pressure. Okay? The key is to allow the heat to work as magic through the tip onto the medium. You should be able to glide with ease without applying a lot of pressure to be able to create your technique and design on the cookie. All right. So as I mentioned, I have between 110 to 150 degrees Celsius. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sit my tip on the cookie, and you're going to see that with the heat, the tip is just going to start to melt into the cookie. I'm hoping you can see that. You can see that my tip is starting to go in there. Now if I had a longer tip, it would go even deeper, but I have a short tip, so the barrier on the outside of the tip that's thicker is holding it from going in deeper. But if I turned my tip this way and just gently gave it a little pressure, you're going to see how it's going into the cookie. And that's because the heat penetrated through that cookie and allowed me to create that hole. But I have high heat and it sat there too long, so you can see that it actually burned. It didn't burn the cookie, but it did give it kind of like a little burn texture to it, which might be pretty if you want to do something that's vintagey like, and it won't taste burnt because it's not really burnt. I just wanted to show you the difference. Now I am going to continue this line. And again, I'm moving slow. And I am just pulling my arm back and allowing my heat pen to glide on the cookie. There's no need to point down, push, and pull. Just let it sit on your cookie and glide. And this basically works for any medium that you're using with your heat pen. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn my heat up to a little bit more than 150 degrees Celsius. I'm going to put it between 150 to 250 degrees Celsius. I'm going to let it heat for a little bit, and then we're going to move a little bit faster so that you can see the difference. Okay, so we're going to sit that there. And meanwhile that's heating up, I just wanted to show you a stenciling design I did on this cookie, and it looks very pretty just the way that it is. The fun part about this is that you can use this as your stenciling to pipe over it with royal icing, or you can just leave it as is and add a little border to make it look like a little vintagey framed cookie. There's so many pretty things you could do with it. You don't even have to use the whole stencil. There are times where I might just use the leaves, and then I will add a fondant or wafer paper flowers in these areas just to kind of give it some dimension. All right, so let's try the heat pen now. Set at the temperature that I mentioned, between 150 to 250 degrees Celsius. Now I'm going to sit there and hold it like I did. And I can smell that it is burning the cookie a little bit more, but I'm going to go ahead and point in and just gently apply a little bit of pressure to move it forward and allow it to create that hole. Okay. I can smell that cookie. It's almost like it's baking in the oven. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move a little faster. And because I am moving faster, I am applying a little bit of pressure. I don't want to have to force the pen to work for me. I want to be able to work with the pen with ease. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna go just for fun. I'm gonna heat it all the way up to 250 degrees Celsius. Now you can see even with the highest heat, I'm still able to work on the cookie and it won't burn it unless I hold it in place for a little bit. Then it starts to kind of, it smells like you're cooking a cookie in the oven and it's over baking. Okay, but it is pretty. I really like the color. It's like a little yellowy color. So I'm gonna let the heat pen sit here for a little bit. And let's try it. Oh yes, see how much quicker that one is going in? Now I can work quicker with it and take it out. And you can see that it has burnt it a little bit less. The heat is higher, like I mentioned earlier. If you work fast, have your heat set a little bit higher. If you work slow, reduce it. Now I'm working a little bit slow, so it's burning the cookie because the heat is set to the maximum. And it's probably still in the process of reaching its maximum heat. But I am working a lot faster and I'm not applying as much pressure. Now, if you want your grooves or your lines to be thinner, just move a little quicker. And you're gonna go from thick to thin. But you see, the heat has burnt the cookie a little bit. And this is where I say having the proper amount of heat for what you want to do. Now I had the right heat here and I was able to stencil with ease, but I didn't get a burnt cookie or, you know, a little bit of yellow tint to it. All right, so this is the importance of the proper heat on your mediums and also the speeds that you're working with. I always suggest work slow, take your time, allow the heat to do its magic, and move your pen with ease. All right. So what I am going to do at the moment is I want to play with this little bunny. And let's say, for example, you want to add details to the bunny so that you could come back and pipe on him. So you could do that with your heat pen. You can also personalize these and write on them. See how clean that is? It's just a clean line. And I left my heat pen at 250 degrees Celsius so I can move a little bit faster. But it's virtually the minute that I touch the cookie, the heat is already softening it up to allow me to move my tip. And when you're working with the heat pen, find methods that is easy for you. I never elevate my hand because I do get shaky hands. So I always try and ground them onto my surface. As you saw, I was taking the cookie with my left hand and moving it around as if it were on one of those little, oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank. One of those little cookie things that swivel, you know. So I just do it with my hand because I know that I could keep it in place. And I leave this one grounded. Find the way that you feel best working with your heat pen. There is no right or wrong way. If you feel comfortable holding it up, then that's fine. If you feel comfortable being grounded on the surface, that's perfectly fine too. Again, practice, play, 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 practice, play, 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 as in any cakey toy. All right, so let's do its little nose. Alrighty, a little nose. I'm gonna come and I'm gonna lightly do it. You can always go over the area more than once to define them a little bit more. It's almost like drawing with your pencil. You do a really light drawing and then you come back and go over it just to define it a little bit more. You could do that with your heat pen as well. Okay, so let's do a couple of whiskers. And let's make these whiskers a little longer. You know, there's a lot of people that don't like the royal icing because it's too sweet, or they you know, a certain amount of sugar limit. So this is a beautiful way to also decorate your cookie and have it taste delicious. Okay, so let's do his little eyes. Okay. And let's just leave one blinking for fun. All right, and you can just go over it. There you go. I know he's not perfect, but you know what? He's cute. All right, so that is a freehand, and you can also, let's write. Let's say, for example, you want to put a message on there. When you're writing, you pretty much hold it like a pen. You could probably, like I said, find what tip works for you. You can use some of these ballpoint tips as well that are round all the way, so it might make it easier for you to maneuver your pen on the cookie. Now, I'm not the best at writing. And I didn't, when you're working with this amount of heat to your maximum, you have to turn your pen off and allow it to cool before changing your tip, because this is so hot that it will definitely burn you. So please, 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 please stay behind this grip right here. So I'm going to keep writing. And I'm moving a little bit faster. There's times where you will get little areas in the cookie when you're engraving that are gonna make your heat pen jump a little bit. That's why it's always nice to move a little slower. So when you get those little rough patches, your pen doesn't go poop and break the cookie. So there you go. Okay, so now I'm going to do a stenciling so I could show you how stenciling works with the cookie. And I'm going to leave it at the high heat so that you can see it doesn't damage your stencils. Again, I am working at 250 degrees Celsius, which is the maximum that the heat pen allows you to go to. Okay. So this is a heart cookie. When you're stenciling on cookies, as we all know, just see how you like for your stencil to fit. Do you want it like this and write a note over here? Do you want it to go sideways? Do you just want the flower? Do you want to put some leaves? I don't know. It depends what stencils you have. Again, the tip depends on what feels best for you to work with. Now, when you are stenciling or wanting to create, define these lines like this and have nice clean lines, I would suggest using the tip that is a bit more pointed versus a tip that is rounded, because that way it's easier for you to create those really nice, clean, thin lines like I have in this cookie. Okay. And I'm able to move fast because my heat is at the maximum. And if you want to move fast and create just a really thin line, that's perfect too, because then you could pipe over it if you want to use it for piping. Or if you want to make it thicker, you can always come back over it with another tip and make it even a little thicker, which we'll do on this one. I'll have to allow my heat pen to cool down a little bit so I could change it to a tip that's a little bit thicker. I kind of lost my place there, but it's okay. And put it back on. There we go. Okay. You can see the smoke coming up. Gotta clean my tip. Okay, so here you see the stencil. I went fast. I created just a really thin little line that could be used as a guide for piping or painting or whatever it is you'd like to do with it. But I'm going to leave it like this, and then I'm going to change my tip to a whiter tip, and I'm going to go over it and give it even more dimension. Now, I have turned off my heat pen. I'm going to allow it to cool a little bit. I'm cleaning it because I had a lot of little cookie excesses on there. Okay. Now this is the core inside, and that is super duper hot because that's what generates the heat to the tip, and it also warms up the whole barrel. All right, so let's for fun try one of the ballpoint tips. I'm going to use the largest one out of the 4, so I'm going to use the largest. Now I do have additional tips that are sold separately, and it has a 5mm ballpoint tip in the kit. So I'm going to go ahead and put in. Now the copper tips tend to absorb the heat a little bit quicker and they do tend to get hotter. So it's really important to test it. Now, it's warm. See how quickly that cooled down? I have my heat pen off. I'm going to turn it on, set it aside. Let's let it cool. And make sure that you have a heat resistant mat. You don't want to burn anything around you when you're laying your hot tips or swapping them out. All right. And while that's heating up, I'll show you what I've done with the fondant. Now I have stenciled on fondant and added wafer paper flowers. The fondant does require a lot less heat because, as we know, it's very soft and sugary and it melts quickly. And here is another cookie that I made, stenciling on fondant. Now, as I was telling you, you don't have to use all of your stencil. This stencil right here is the same as this. I just used the leaf portions and played them out differently, and then I just put wafer paper flowers, and I added a butterfly, and then I did one of those get well soon stamps. And this is fondant as well. Okay. All right, so now I feel my cookie heating up. I'm gonna go ahead and test it. All right, can use a little bit more time. And these are great too if you want to do like an ornament cookie. These tips, it makes the perfect little hole. And as you see, I'm pushing too much still, so it's not heated, but it makes the perfect little hole to put a little ribbon or a little string to hang it as an ornament. Let's see this one. It's also perfect to make little eyes or little indentations, and then you can put pearls so they don't sit outside on top of the cookie. They can go in those little holes with royal icing, and we might try to do one with pearls. That's a great idea. So it's, like I said, is playing around with your tips, being creative, and there's so much you can do. Okay, so let's see if this is ready. I'm moving very slow because I can tell that the heat is not completely to the maximum yet. But you can see how I have enlarged this area right here. And again, you don't have to use the ballpoint tip. There are other ones in your kit that might be easier for you to maneuver. And it will create the same effect. And I always like moving slow because if I move too fast and I get those little areas where you hit a rough patch and your arm skips, I don't want to ruin the cookie. When you're working with isomalt, the good thing about it is you can remelt it, but cookies you cannot remelt and bake, so be patient. All right, see the difference between that side and this side? Okay, now that was a ballpoint tip. Now I'm going to swap this tip out and do the other side so that you can see that there's going to be similarities. Although the tips are different from each other, they will have some similarities in how they design. It's basically playing with them because some might be easier for you to maneuver than others. And as again, I said, this is great for creating little grooves to put pearls in or little holes. Okay, so let's see what tip we're gonna use. Okay, we're gonna use this tip that is in the kit. It is slanted and soft on one side and a little bit pointed, so it goes almost like an oval up at the top. So we're going to use this one. And when you're using it, make sure that the right side that is smooth is going downward. So when you're using your heat pen, you're not, well, I'm sure both sides, we're going to do both sides so you can see, but it will be easier to have the smoother side on the surface to work with. Okay. So we're going to change that tip out. Ooh, that's hot. Lay that to the side. Okay. Let's see here. So it's a little bit upside down. Now again, make sure your pen is hot, because when you're doing this, you definitely don't want it to be on. It will burn your fingers. My pen's already cooled down. I'm going to turn it back on. And we're going to give it time. Meanwhile, I'm going to take all these crumbs off of here. And let it warm up a little bit. I should get some royal icing. I had some in the freezer. I didn't take it out, but I'm gonna decorate a cookie with royal icing, and one side with royal icing, and I'll do one with the pearlies and the vintagey look, and that way you can see the difference between the two. Like I said, there's so much you can do. It's just being creative with it. This is isomalt. It does require between 110 to 250 degrees Celsius. And I stenciled on this. You can use them as toppers, or you can even do little pieces to put on a cookie. I mean, there's just so much you can do. Okay. So let me test it on here to see if it's ready. Not yet. Almost. If you're laying your pen on there and it's still not sinking in, your heat in your tip is not ready for use. You will know once you put it on there and it just starts to sink on its own. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere. See, it's sinking on its own. All right. That's a great way to test it. If you're having to apply too much force, then you still need to let your heat pen heat up a little bit more. And I still need to give it a little bit more time. Okay, we're getting there. All right, so let's try on this side. So I'm going to do the same thing on this side, and you're going to see that it's going to look like the other side. The only difference you might be able to tell is with the ballpoint tip, you get smoother edges around the stenciling or the etching than you do with one that is flat on one side and pointed on the other, because it kind of gives it a groove versus a round. Nonetheless, they both give you a beautiful result. But it is a clear example of playing with your tips to see which one works best for what you're wanting to do. Okay. Now this one built like a little side wall up on top because it's not round, so you could see the difference. Just kind of clean the sides off a little bit. See all that little residue. They both still give you the same result. The only thing is this one has more of an indentation. This one has more of a softer, rounder indentation. So it's virtually just playing with your tips to see which one works best for what you're wanting to do. Okay? If you wanted to come back over here with this tip, just to kind of give it similarity to the other side, then you could do that too. Okay, let's say, oh, I prefer to have more of a indentation in the stenciling. Then just go over it with the same tip that you used, and that way you'll have your similarities. See? Okay, so for the petals, let's just leave the same tip, but let's turn it upside down. So if I'm turning the tip upside down, it has more of a little point. I'm gonna turn it right side up. And I don't know if you can tell the difference. This side seems to be a little thinner, and this side appears to be a little thicker. And I'm going to do this again over here on the clean side. So we're going to be using a flat, rounded side of the tip, and we're just going to push backwards. Just glide, just a gentle glide, and do it twice. And then I'm going to turn my pen around and use the tip portion. I don't know if you could see that. The tip portion, which is more elevated up. Okay. So I'm going to turn my pen upside down. And I'm going to do the same thing with the tip. So you're going to see the difference. This is a lot thicker, has a thicker groove, and this one is a thinner line. Or let's say this is a thicker line, and that one is a thinner line. So these are examples of how you can play with your tips. You can play with the top portion, you can play with the bottom portion, and kind of flip them around, and you get like different sizes in your lines. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put a thin tip. I'm going to do a longer one to do the flowers so you can see how that one works compared to the shorter one. Now, the reason I like the shorter one is because it's easier for me to maneuver on the surface than it is the longer one, because the longer ones are thin, so you're kind of like sometimes struggling with them because they're longer. And this one is great because it's small, it gets to the point, it does what it needs to, and it also has this thicker part here which keeps you from going in too deep. At least for me, that's how I look at that tip. So we're going to use, let's do one with a longer tip. Okay, so this one is thin but longer in comparison to this one. All right, so I turn my pen off. I'm going to go ahead and swap out my tip, and we're going to use the longer one now for the floral petals so that you can see how that one works. Turn my pen on. Now I'm still at 250 degrees Celsius. And as you can see, my cookie hasn't burnt. It's still working just perfectly fine. All right. So we're going to go ahead and let that heat up. And I'm going to go grab some pearls. Okay, I think my tip should be hot enough. Let's test it as we have the other ones. Yes. If you can see that. I don't really have to apply much pressure. Again, you could just see the tip sinking into the cookie just by sitting there. Another way to tell is apply very little pressure and you can see it going into the cookie without any force whatsoever. See that? That's another way to tell because it is heating up your cookie and allowing the heat pen to do its magic. There you go. All right, so now we're going to do the floral petals with this tip. It's the same as this one, only this one's a little bit thicker in the tip and a little bit shorter, but I wanted to try the different one, the longer one, so you could see that it will do what the other one will, but it may be easier for you to use. It may be difficult. I'm not sure. Just play around with your tip. Now this one, when you are working with it, it is longer, so it does dig in a little deeper. But it's also good if you have like hard to reach places and you want to just put your tip in there like a needle and play with it. So I did this one petal in comparison. Let's take off those little cookie edges. You could see in comparison to the other petal, it's basically the same, only a little bit deeper. Okay. Now, this is a great example. I left a piece of cookie in there. I didn't clean my tip and it started to burn. So you see that little burnt piece right there? That's what happens when your tips don't get cleaned. It starts to burn, and then you could transfer that little burnt section from one to the other. And we don't want to do that. So it's always important to keep your tips clean. All right. So that's how these tips work. Again, it's what works best for what you're trying to do. Play with them and practice with them. I love this one more than this one for certain things, and I love this one more than this one for other things. It all depends on what you're trying to do. For example, if I'm going to work on isomalt, I love this tip. See? I just went right through the isomalt. It's very thin. I wanted a thin line. I love the thin ones on isomalt. So it's basically what mediums you're working with. They're all going to do basically the same thing on every medium, but some might work better with other mediums than they are on the one that you're working with. So important to always try them out and test them. All right, so we're going to go ahead and finish the flower. I'm just going to finish with this tip so we don't have to wait for the pen to cool down and switch them around. Okay. Clean up the excess from another cookie. Okay, so for the flower, let's say we want to add a couple little, you know, lines on the petals to make them look more like real flowers. This is a great tip for that. And if you notice, my pen is always at a slant because I'm grounded to the base. I don't face it downward. I just slant it and let the tip generate the heat and glide it to the direction that I want. There's no need to apply pressure or force. Okay. I don't know if you could see all those little lines in there. Let's say we want to add a little bit more here. That's perfectly fine. Okay. Now, can you write with this tip? Yes, you can. Will it be easier than another one? That all depends on what feels more comfortable for you. But yes, you can write with this tip too. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn off my heat pen. We're going to go back to the ballpoint pen and I'm going to apply some little pearls on here. Let's have some fun with this. You could be so creative with the heat pen on cookies, and it could be utilized to make so many beautiful designs. And I love the fact that you can use it as an outline for royal icing versus a pencil or a marker, because sometimes the color could transfer or you don't cover the area enough, and then it's like, oh, I can see the marker underneath. And this doesn't have that problem. And also another plus is when you have these little indentations or grooves here, your royal icing will fall in there and kind of stay in place. All right. So we're going to make little pearl holes, and we're going to add them on with a little bit of royal icing as glue. You could also use chocolate if you didn't want to use royal icing. But I think royal icing would work perfectly fine. I'm going to take, I had this in the freezer. I'm going to take out a little bit. And I'm going to see what happens when I put the heat pen on it. Let me bring this little piece over here. See, you can work on royal icing as well. And I'm just manipulating it to the sides. There you go. And this was in the freezer. This is some royal icing I had in the freezer. Remember, this is food safe. Okay, so let's just say I want to come in here and kind of play around with the royal icing a little bit. See how it kind of softens it up, but it's not burning it. So this is also a great way to work with royal icing on cookies if you wanted to. Okay. So just kind of, let's say you want to make a little design. Bring it up, elevate it. which is what I'm doing. I would probably use a little less heat because I have it set at my maximum. So you can see that it melts and goes right back into the middle. So if I do this, see how it melts and starts to fold in? So if you had less heat, you could probably do some dimensional stuff with the royal icing. So I'm gonna clean this off so I could bring my cookie here. And let's make, let's put a couple little pearls in the middle. So I'm gonna go ahead and make my little holes to set the pearls in. Put one in the middle. Okay. See the little holes? And what I did was I just took my tip and just kind of pushed down a little bit. Just so I didn't let it sit there. I don't want to make them too deep. But I just kind of gently tapped over and over until it made the little holes for my pearls to sit in. Okay, so now let's see how the pearls are gonna fit. I'm using some that aren't that large because it's the middle of the flower. So they're a little bit small. We got about 5. Just take your little tweezer. All these things that always run away from me. All right, so you take your tweezer. Oh, geez. All right, first off, let me get a little bit of royal icing. All right. Make sure you clean your tip so you don't start to smell that royal icing. So let's bring this little pearl and set it on some royal icing and put it into place. Clean off the side. Okay, there we go. Push it down. Clean off the sides. You got too much royal icing in there, so I don't have my silicone tools next to me, so I'm gonna remove some with that tip. Clean this off. Let's put the one in the middle. Shoulder down. Okay. See how pretty that looks? Now, if you wanted to pipe roll icing on the outside or just leave it like this or paint or whatever, it looks gorgeous. It's just a little delicate vintage look. All right. Now I want to, for fun, add some bigger pearls out here. Let's see. So if I want to make my holes a little larger, I'm just gonna push out with the tip, you know, like a circle, you're pushing around it, or just go around. But I find it easier to push out on the sides and kind of create a bigger indentation. Now, if you're going to be using larger pearls, you might want to do them a little deeper. Try one. If you don't like how it fits, you can always take it off and then add some more depth with your tip. And I just, for fun, come around this area. Now I'm using the side of my tip to do this. I'm not pushing downward because it is a round tip, so I'm going to get a circle no matter how I hold it, but it's just easier for me to always have my hand grounded. All right. So we're just gonna do one side and put some over here too. Okay, those are good. I'm gonna leave this side as this because we could do some other stuff there just so you can see how you could do different things with this. I'm gonna get a little bit more royal icing and put it there. I'll warm it up a little bit because it's been in the freezer. All right, I want to clean my tip, make sure it's clean. I want the sugar burning on there. And now I have these pearls that are a little bit larger. Hopefully these don't run away from me, so we're gonna put some out. Okay. Now you can always size your pearls like smaller and larger. Let's do that. That might look a little bit better. Let's do some smaller ones, and then we'll get to the larger ones. Now, when you're laying your pen next to you like this and you're not using it, be extremely careful that it's not near something that could start burning because you're not using it. Just turn it off. Turn it off and then turn it back on when you're ready to use it so it doesn't sit there and inadvertently start to burn something or you burn yourself because you're applying these pearls and you're not really paying attention to where your heat pen is laying down. So let's start with the larger ones. Now these holes are a little bit small for the pearls, so I'm going to enlarge them so that they sit a little bit more naturally in the cookie. And it's just basically, again, using your tip, pushing out to the sides to make the little holes larger. All right, let's try one pearl on there before I stick it to make sure it's the right size. I might want a little bit more. Now again, the size all depends on the size of your pearls. Now I happen to have these sizes on hand, so I'm making the size work with what I have. Okay, that should be good. Let's try it. Perfect. Too much royal icing on that one. Take your tip, heat up this royal icing if it gets a little bit too hard on you. There you go. Your tip is still hot even though your pen is off. So you can always take advantage of that heat and use it to soften up your royal icing, because as it sits out, it starts to get a little bit hard and then it won't stick to the pearls. There we go. I didn't make these holes any bigger, so I'm going to have to turn my heat pen back on and make them a little larger. I just want to show you, isn't that beautiful? Look how pretty that is. Again, you could use chocolate. You didn't want to use royal icing, you could use chocolate as your glue. Okay. Now notice I'm pushing outward this way because I'm so close to this line right here. I don't want the wall to collapse on me from the cookie. So I'm pushing outward where I have more room away from that line. Okay, I think this should be big enough. Heat up some royal icing. Maybe I can even take some with my tip and apply it in there so that's already in there for the pearls. Here we go. All right, let's see if that's gonna work. Yeah. Now, if you want to secure your pearls even more, then I would suggest making the hole, I got some royal icing on there, making the holes deeper so that your pearls are more secure in place. So you can make the holes deeper, and that way you don't have to worry like, oh, what if the pearl falls out? Because that does happen. The pearl might get loose and fall. You can always make it deeper, it's not a problem. So we're gonna do that one deeper. And we're gonna set it in there so you can see the difference. And my royal icing is crusted and hard. So I'm gonna warm it up a little bit with my tip. Now my tip is super hot, so it is burning it a little bit. If you're gonna work with the royal icing, then make sure that you use less heat. But because I want to use this as my glue, okay, I'm not worried about it burning a little bit. Oops, nope, that didn't work. And the hole is still needs to be a little bit larger for the pearl. So I'm going to make it larger by working out the sides. I'm going to give it a circular motion. Bring it back out this way. And you can see that's pretty big. So let's see how that's going to fall in there. Yep. See the difference in height of the pearl and the cookie? Let me stick it in there with some royal icing, and then I'm going to go ahead and secure it, and then I will prop it up for you to see. Okay. All right, so here's the difference. If you do like a little teeny hole to put your pearl in, they're going to be more elevated on your cookie, which could be a higher risk for them to get loosened and fall off if you accidentally bump them or you're transporting your cookies somewhere. This little sucker doesn't want to stay stuck in here, but he's going to. There we go. So if you wanted to secure your pearls in a little bit better with your cookie, just make your hole a little bit deeper and rounder depending on the size of your pearl. And I don't know if you could see how much deeper this pearl is into the cookie. There went that one into the cookie compared to the other one. And I would probably suggest going in a little deeper with your pearls so that they stay in place. And my royal icing just isn't working with me today. So I'm going to come back and get these guys stuck in here. I'm gonna put this one in a little bit deeper as well. I'm gonna go ahead and just stick a little royal icing in there with this tip, and then put the cookies, pearls in there. Okay, let's get another pearl. Oops. Okay. All right. There they go. See, those two are in more. And they look just as pretty. They don't have to be so elevated. They could be in deeper and you're fine. Okay, so we've got the pearls in there. And now I'm going to turn my heat pen off. Kind of clean this mess out of here. And let's play around with the other side and just kind of do some engraving so that you could see the difference between what it looks like if you were to pearlize. Now, if I wanted to, I could go with royal icing and pipe right over this line just to give it that much more texture and dimension. So key is be creative, try different tips, and see what works best for what you want to do. Again, you could just do freehand or stencil. You could pipe over, you could add pearls. You can still add pearls and pipe over, which is great. So it's just basically what you're trying to do. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and change my tip. And I'm gonna put my tip that I like best to work with creating those fine lines because it is short. I don't have to worry about it going too deep, and I'm closer to the surface of the cookie as I'm working with it, so it's easier for me to maneuver to be able to stencil and etch on the cookie, or engrave on the cookie, should I say? Yes, engrave. Okay, so I'm gonna wait for this to get hot enough. It's not there yet. And I still have not changed the setting of my temperature. And it's still at 250 degrees Celsius. All right, so let's see if we're there yet. Again, just set your heat pen and apply very minimal pressure. And if it's going in with ease, your heat is good. Okay, so there we go. See, just went in super easy. I'm gonna do this again on the side view. I'm applying very little pressure and my tip is going in. And as the heat gets to its full max, it will be easier for it to go in. But you notice it's not, because it's not burnt like these are, so I still need to go a little bit more. Let's try it again. We're almost there, but I think I can go ahead and start working with it. If you feel that you're having to struggle too much, just set it aside and let it continue to reach its maximum in heat. All right, so on this one, I might do just some stylized leaves. Okay, so we added a couple of leaves on this side. We're gonna add another one here. So I kind of want it to face the other direction. do another one here. See how pretty that looks? So let's say we wanted to add some more curly cues or some more swirls coming around here, just to give it more of a filigree look. Okay. And then let's say we wanted to add a teeny one over here. Okay. Okay. And then I want to add just one coming up around here and kind of crossing over this one. Okay, so now you can see the difference between both sides. One is just fully engraved, one has little pearls. You can always just leave the pearls inside the flower. You can add so many different things to this. You can pipe over it, as I mentioned earlier. You can just add fondant pieces or wafer paper pieces, or just leave your cookie the way that it is and stenciling up here for a special message. It all depends on how you want to decorate. And again, the important and key thing is the proper heat for the medium that you're working with. And as far as your tips go, play with them, try them out, see which one feels best for what you want to engrave with or stencil with. Anything that you want to do on your cookie surface. Just try your different tips. Have an extra cookie, play around with that, get the feel of your heat pen with the tip before you go to work onto your final piece. I hope you've enjoyed this little demonstration and mini tutorial on how to work on sugar cookies. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the comments. I will respond to them or message me.